that I last told it. Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, most honored guests, this club has changed quite a bit since I last told the story. A lot of new faces, a lot of young people. That's good. If you're here, that means you're doing more towards your objectives than I did when I was your age. But I think that those objectives are probably the same. I wanted to accumulate wealth, live a comfortable lifestyle. I wanted recognition, get credit for my accomplishments. I wanted to travel to many exotic places. I also wanted to have a lot of good sex. Okay, I know I'm not Brad Pitt, and I wasn't when I was younger, but can you blame me for wanting that? And let me tell you, there were times in my life when I actually obtained some of those objectives. Not as often as I would have liked, but I'm okay with that. That New Year's Eve, I didn't make any progress on any of them. It did not have the makings of a memorable New Year's Eve. I was alone in a strange city. I just got a contract to be a programmer. This was at the end of 1992, the beginning of 1993. I was in my early 40s. I knew nobody in that town. I just gotten a studio apartment. It was not in a terribly good neighborhood. Panhandlers were constantly approaching me, asking me for money. And to make matters worse, that New Year's Eve, that was bitterly cold. I don't mean the type of cold we have here in Bellingham. If you're like Madam Toastmaster and you've lived in the Midwest, then you know the wind chill could get down below zero, and no matter how many layers of clothes you might put on, the cold will cut right through and just pierce you to the bone. No way I was going to go out and look for a New Year's Eve event. But there was no food in my small studio apartment. I was starting to get hungry. So I darted out of my apartment, got in my car, went to a grocery store, got myself a couple of days worth of groceries, went back outside when I was approached by a haggard man. He said, "Oh no, someone's going to ask me for money again. Could you help me jumpstart my car? I think I have a dead battery." That caught me by surprise. "Okay," I said. "Where are you parked?" "Over there." "Okay, I'll be right there." I darted around him into my car, getting out of the cold. Started my car up. I really had no intention of going to help this man out, getting out of the cold and helping him jumpstart my car. But a voice in my head says, "Hey, why don't you start the year out right?" So I drove over to his car. He didn't expect me to help him. He was sitting the only place he could to get anywhere out of the cold inside his car. At least it was outside of the wind, but with a dead battery, his heater wasn't working very good. "I'm sorry I asked you. I don't think it's a dead battery. When I turn the ignition, nothing happens." He even showed me. And besides, this is not the first time this happened. Whenever the car gets cold, whenever the weather gets cold, I have this problem. Well, it just so happened that I had lived in upstate New York previous to this, with a car with a questionable battery, and I knew this was a possible symptom. Well, I have to be honest, he said. I really don't have jumper cables, and I wouldn't even know how to use them. Well, ever since I had lived in upstate New York, I always kept the jumper cables in my car. I could see this was a decent man who did not deserve to be stuck out in the bitter cold all night long. So I urged him to just let me try. Finally, he agreed. I connected the jumper cables, started up my car, and I asked him to start up his car. He turned the ignition, and his car roared to life. He was so appreciative. He insisted upon paying me. But I told him. I stubbornly refused. You see, he had already done enough for me. He had already done enough for me. Now that's why I so seldomly tell this story. If I just told you this, you might say, Bob, you're such a great guy, helping that guy out, starting his car. Well, I'm not being overly modest if I tell you there's been too many times in my life when I've had this opportunity and I've just driven away, just wanting to get myself out of the cold. You might even be saying, Bob, what's the big deal? You braved the cold for a couple of minutes. You started his car up. It's not that hard if you know what you're doing. And you know, perhaps that is closer to the truth. But that still misses the point. I guess the best way I could describe this is if I say I was never a championship athlete in high school or any other time. I never knew what it was like, the feeling to hit the game-winning home run or to throw the game-winning pass. But let me tell you, when that car started up, I think I felt that because there was this surge of excitement that went through every cell in my body. I went home that night. Yes, I was still stuck in that small studio apartment, but I didn't mind it one bit because I was so excited about what happened. And even the next day, New Year's Day, I was still alone, still in a strange city, but I still felt the afterglow of the excitement of the previous night. Even today, I know I've been to places, exotic places like Stonehenge in England, and that was exciting seeing that. Or the Western Wall in Jerusalem, that was exciting. Those memories fade. That night, that cold, bitterly cold night in St. Louis when I was all alone, that remains a shining star in my life. Whenever I feel depressed, whenever I get down on myself, I think about that night and what happened. Now I know that when you do a good deed, it will not always be such a rousing success. Maybe the battery, maybe it had not been a problem with the battery, and I would not have been able to start his car. Or maybe he would not have been so deserving, not so appreciative, and this is what usually happens. Babe Ruth did not always hit the game-winning home run whenever he went up to bat. But doing good deeds, I've realized, will give you an unmatched feeling of fulfillment. That's why I urge everybody, make doing good deeds one of your life's objectives. But don't just do it because it's the right thing to do. Do it for your own self-esteem. Do it for your own spiritual uplifting. I never really planned to keep this story a secret, but I just want to make sure that whenever I tell it, I make it clear But this is not about what I gave. It's about what I got. Madam Toastmaster.